They told me to be quiet, to swallow it like a rock stuck in my throat. That night, in the lobby of an exclusive club, my stepmother used my aunt's own purse to strike my shoulder in front of our relatives. My wealthy grandfather just slowly said, "Open the bag." When the clasp clicked open, the whole room changed. Secrets, papers, and my plan. Everything was waiting inside. Think you know the rest? Go ahead and try. My name is Noelle Whitaker. I am 28 years old, and I am a supply chain optimization engineer. That title is a clean, antiseptic description for what I actually do, which is find the flaws in a system and fix them before they hemorrhage money. I am good at it because my entire life has been an exercise in finding the flaws. I grew up in Renfield, Ohio. If you have ever driven through the Midwest, you have passed a dozen Renfields. It is the kind of town defined by what it used to be, a place with good bones and a persistent cough. Sitting under a flat gray sky, my skin is fair, the kind that remembers the sun but rarely holds a tan, a typical product of the industrial heartland. My father, Evan Whitaker, died when I was 5. I have impressions of him, not memories, the smell of sawdust, the rough texture of his hands, the sound of a low chuckle. I have his name, and that is all. My mother, Lydia, did not cope well with the silence. She filled it quickly. She married Marla. Marla was sharp, polished, and carried the scent of expensive citrus perfume that always seemed to clash with the humid Ohio air. She was not cruel in the storybook sense. She was simply indifferent to anything that did not reflect her own image. She was a curator, and I was a piece of furniture from a previous marriage that she could not throw out. And then came Savannah, my half-sister. Savannah was born into the light. She was Marla's biological daughter, Lydia's second chance, and the family's golden child. Where I was quiet, Savannah was vibrant. Where I was practical, Savannah was charming. In our small orbit, she was the sun, and I quickly learned to live in the shade. The family, aunts, uncles, even my grandfather, back then, orbited her. My presence became an administrative oversight, a rounding error in their domestic math. I was not abused. I was simply edited out. My accomplishments were footnotes. Savannah's were headlines. I learned early that love was conditional, and I did not meet the conditions. I learned to be invisible, to require nothing. It was safer that way. The day I turned 18, I graduated from Renfield High. I wore the dark blue gown, moved the tassel, and held the diploma. I remember Marla and Lydia sitting in the bleachers, clapping, for Savannah, who had won some preparatory award, even though she was only a sophomore. I walked home with them, the humid June air sticking the gown to my back. At home, the atmosphere was thin. Marla called me into the kitchen. Lydia was there, studying the grout on the floor as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Well, Noelle," Marla said, wiping an already spotless counter. "Congratulations, you are an adult now." I waited. I knew this tone. It was the tone she used before cleaning out a closet, deciding what to keep and what to donate. "Lydia and I feel you are ready for the next step," she continued. "Savannah needs your room. She is growing up, you know, and she needs the space for her activities, her social clubs." I looked at my mother. Lydia met my eyes for half a second, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or just exhaustion, before her gaze dropped back to the floor. She was a ghost in her own house. "We packed a bag for you," Marla said, gesturing to a single, soft-sided suitcase by the back door. "Just the essentials." It was not a discussion. It was a transaction, a hostile takeover of my 6-by-8-foot bedroom. An hour later, Marla drove me to the bus station. It was not even the main terminal. It was the suburban stop, a concrete island with a fiberglass bench under a flickering orange streetlight, wedged between a highway overpass and a truck depot. The air smelled of diesel fumes, damp concrete, and the faint, sour tang of the nearby paper mill. She did not get out of the car. She unlocked the trunk from the driver's seat. I pulled my suitcase out. It was lighter than I expected. "This is not child abandonment, Noelle," Marla said through the open window. Her voice practical, almost kind, as if explaining a budget. "This is celebrating your independence. You are 18. The law says you are an adult. We did our job." She drove away. The red taillights disappeared around the curve. I was left standing on the asphalt island. The streetlight buzzed overhead, a rhythm for the insects crashing against the plastic. I looked down. I was still wearing my thin graduation dress under a lightweight jacket. The air was cooling, and the smell of machine oil from the truck depot was heavy on the wind. I was not hysterical. I was not even crying. I just felt the click of a switch. A circuit had been completed. I was an adult. This was the next step. I checked my pockets. My diploma was in the suitcase, in the pocket of my jacket. My fingers brushed against paper. It was a single bill, a $10 bill. I did not know how it got there. Maybe Lydia slipped it in when I was not looking. A tiny, silent act of defiance. Maybe it was left over from lunch money weeks ago. It was $10. That was my inheritance. That was my starting capital. I sat on the bench until the first bus came, the one heading toward the industrial park, and I paid the fare. Years later, when I had my first real paycheck, I took that original $10 bill and had it laminated. I keep it in my wallet, in a slot behind my driver's license. It is not sentiment. It is ballast. It is my spiritual seed money, a reminder of my initial valuation. The next few years were a blur of gray fatigue. I learned to survive on the edges. My first job was washing dishes at a 24-hour diner, the Crossroads Cafe. My second was stocking shelves on the graveyard shift at a distribution warehouse. I was a ghost moving through the fluorescent-lit aisles of other people's lives. I slept where I could, until I met Mrs. Romero. She ran a small immigrant diner, El Nido, squeezed between a tire shop and a laundromat. It was tiny, maybe 6 booths and a counter. She had kind eyes and hands permanently stained with chili spices. I ate there once, spending nearly 2 hours over a single cup of coffee and a bowl of soup, trying to absorb the warmth. She watched me. She did not ask my story. She just said, "You look tired, mija, and you look clean." That night, she offered me a deal. She had a dry stockroom in the back, small, windowless, but warm. It smelled of dried corn husks, cumin, and cardboard. It was safe. In exchange, I washed every dish from the dinner rush until close, long after the last customer left, and I mopped the floors. I slept on a cot between sacks of flour and industrial-sized cans of tomatoes. The steady hum of the coolers was my lullaby. It was the safest I had felt in years. During the day, I did not sleep. I went to the Renfield Town Library. It was free, it was heated, and the librarians did not care how long you stayed as long as you were quiet. I started reading. I did not know what to study, so I studied structure. I studied the systems that moved the world. It was the maps that truly caught me. I found an old atlas in the donation bin. I spread it out on the library table. I looked at the web of highways, the blue lines of interstates, the red veins of state routes. It was a circulatory system. I started taking notes in a cheap, spiral-bound notebook. I bought it at the dollar store. The cover was flimsy, and the blue lines on the paper were slightly crooked. My first project was Mrs. Romero's deliveries. Her produce supplier always arrived late, his truck coughing black smoke, his invoices a mess. He charged her a high fuel surcharge. "He says the traffic," she would sigh, wringing her apron. I asked to see the invoices. I took the delivery schedule and the supplier's address. I spent 3 nights at the library mapping it. He was taking the main highway during rush hour. I drew a new route on a napkin. It used the surface streets, cut through an industrial park, and avoided 3 major bottlenecks. I timed the traffic lights based on my walk to the library. I gave the napkin to Mrs. Romero. "Tell him to try this," I said. "It is 6 miles shorter, and if he leaves at 10:30 a.m. instead of 9 a.m., he misses the delivery rush at the supermarket hub." She gave the driver the napkin. He grumbled, but he tried it. He arrived 40 minutes earlier the next day. Mrs. Romero looked at me, her eyes wide. She did not say anything. She just put an extra arepa on my plate that night. I started applying this to everything. I mapped the routes of the city buses, calculating the fastest way to get from the diner to the library to the warehouse job I still kept on weekends. I optimized the stocking pattern in Mrs. Romero's walk-in cooler, placing high turnover items like milk and cheese closest to the door, cutting her prep time. I did not know it was called logistics. I just called it making sense. I saved my money from the warehouse job, not the $10 bill, but new money. I bought an old, refurbished laptop. I taught myself to code, using the library's free internet. Simple scripts, how to calculate fuel consumption against mileage and weight, how to factor in mandatory driver breaks, my cheap notebooks filled with algorithms, maps, and lists. My break did not come from a grand gesture. It came from a leaky faucet. A man named Mr. Henderson, a regional manager for a mid-sized company called Harbor Span Freight, was a regular at El Nido. He always ate at the counter, always ordered the same thing, black coffee and 2 eggs over easy, and always read the shipping manifests while he ate. One Tuesday, the sink in the men's room burst a pipe. Mrs. Romero was frantic. I came out from the back, saw the water pooling, and immediately went to the main shut-off valve under the counter. I had mapped the diner's plumbing, just in case. I shut the water off. Henderson was watching me, his breakfast half eaten. "You knew exactly where that was," he said. It was not a question. "It is the logical place for it," I replied, grabbing a mop. "My logistics guy doesn't have that kind of initiative," he grumbled. He paid his bill and left. He came back the next day. "My night dispatcher just quit," he said, not even looking at the menu. He walked out mid-shift. "I have 2 trucks in Nebraska that are off route, and a high-value load sitting in a broken-down rig in Illinois." I stopped wiping the counter. "Where in Nebraska?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow. "Near Kearney. They are lost." "They are not lost," I said, grabbing a napkin. "They missed the junction for I-80 West because the state route is closed for construction. They are trying to loop back, but they are going south. They need to take Route 30 north to the access road at Elm Creek. It will add 2 hours, but it is the only way." Henderson stared at me. "How do you know that?" "I read the Department of Transportation alerts," I said. "For fun." He pushed his coffee cup aside. "Mrs. Romero, I am hiring your dishwasher." "Mrs." Romero cried, but she hugged me, packed me a bag of food, and told me, "Go, mija, draw your maps." Harbor Span Freight was not glamorous. It was a series of double-wide trailers next to a massive, echoing warehouse. The air smelled of diesel, stale coffee, and ozone from the old computer terminals. Henderson pointed me to a desk. It was beige metal, scarred and dented, but on the wall in front of it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. It was a map, a massive wall-sized map of the United States. It was covered in pins, colored strings, and grease pencil routes, red pins for urgent loads, yellow for standard, blue for empty trucks. It was a living, breathing system of chaos, and my job was to tame it. For the first time, I was not looking at a map of a place I could not go. I was looking at a machine, and I was being handed the levers. I stood there for a full minute, just taking it in. The hum of the servers, the static crackle of the dispatch radio, the smell of machine oil that I now associated not with abandonment, but with movement. I turned to Henderson. He looked exhausted. "The Illinois truck," I said. "What is the cargo? And what is the temperature requirement?" That night, I did not just reroute the Nebraska trucks. I found a certified repair shop for the Illinois rig, arranged a cross-load of the cargo to a local refrigerated unit to save the product, and optimized the routes for the next morning's departures out of Cleveland. I worked for 18 hours straight. When the sun came up, tinting the dusty windows of the trailer orange, I was still there. I looked at the big board. I had untangled the mess. The red pins were moving. The blue pins were assigned. I thought about the bus stop. I thought about the $10 bill in my wallet. They had left me by the road. I looked at the map, this vast network of possibilities. I made a promise to myself. It was not a vow of revenge. It was a vow of efficiency. I would not just find my way. I would draw the maps. I would control the routes. I would decide the schedule. I grabbed my cheap spiral notebook, the one from the library, and opened it to a clean page. I would not ask for a seat at their table. I would build my own, and I would bill them for the materials. My name is Noelle Whitaker, and this is how I learned to navigate. I chose to move forward, to focus on the cold, clean discipline of the system. I would not beg for expired love. The dispatch trailer at Harbor Span Freight became my university. My scholarship was the paycheck Henderson signed every 2 weeks, and my laboratory was the big wall map. I lived on caffeine, the glow of old green screen monitors, and the adrenaline of solving small-scale emergencies. My world shrank to the size of a 20-mile traffic jam outside Chicago, a blizzard warning in the Rockies, or a failed refrigeration unit in a trailer full of pharmaceuticals in Arizona. I learned the rhythms of the country by its logistical heartbeat. Produce moving east from California, auto parts moving south from Michigan, textiles moving north from Georgia. But I was still just reacting. Henderson was a good boss, but he was old school. He managed by gut instinct and a well-worn Rolodex. I saw the waste. I saw the routes chosen out of habit, not efficiency. I saw the trucks deadheading, driving empty, because the paperwork was too slow to match a return load. I knew I needed more than instinct. I needed theory. I found a community college program offering an online certification in logistics and supply chain management. It was affordable, but affordable is a relative term when you are living on a dispatcher's salary and saving every extra dime. I applied for and won a Women in STEM community grant, a small scholarship funded by a local manufacturing heiress. It covered the tuition. My nights changed. After my 12-hour shift at the dispatch desk, I would go back to my tiny, clean apartment, a 1-bedroom unit over a garage that I rented from a retired couple, and I would log on. While the city slept, I was studying network design, inventory management, and transportation law. The virtual lectures were dry, but to me, they were a secret language. They were giving names to the problems I saw every day. Bottlenecking, last-mile inefficiency, demand forecasting. I was not just doing the homework, I was field testing it. I started applying the principles in my spiral notebooks. I was still using them. Cheap, flimsy paper and all. They were faster than a spreadsheet for initial ideas. I became obsessed with routing. The software HarborSpan used was archaic, a relic from 1995. It could give you a route from A to B, but it could not think. It could not account for a school zone at 3 p.m., a way station that was notoriously slow on Fridays, or a local bridge with a new weight restriction. I, on the other hand, was learning to code. Not just the simple scripts from the library. I was learning Python in the dead of night, my screen bright in the darkness, debugging code while the rest of the world was dreaming. I decided to build my own tool. I called it Swiftlines. It was not a real company. It was just a folder on my laptop. The first version was laughably simple, built on a patchwork of open-source mapping data and my own algorithms. It was ugly. It was just a command-line interface, but it was mine. You could input up to 12 addresses. You could add variables. This stop must be before noon. This stop has a 2-hour unload time. This stop requires a refrigerated dock. You would hit Enter. And instead of just giving the shortest route, my code would churn. It would run 10,000 simulations in a few seconds. It would factor in average traffic data for that time of day, estimated fuel burn for a 40,000-pound load, and even the cost of the driver's time. Then, it would spit out a single, optimized route, the most efficient path. I needed data to test it. I could not use HarborSpan's trucks. Henderson would have a heart attack if I started rerouting his fleet with my home experiment. So I went local. I went back to my old neighborhoods. But this time, I was not asking for a job. I was offering a service. I started with a local flower shop. Pedal pushers. They ran 2 vans, delivering bouquets all over the suburbs. Their fuel bills were killing them. The owner, a stressed woman named Brenda, showed me her delivery book. It was a mess of handwritten addresses, with a driver trying to guess the best route on the fly. "Let me try something," I said. "For 1 week, for free. Just give me your addresses the night before." She agreed. She had nothing to lose. That night, I plugged her 24 deliveries into Swift lines. I gave her back 2 optimized run sheets the next morning, printed out at the library. At the end of the week, Brenda pulled me into her back room, her eyes wide. She held up her fuel receipts. I do not understand," she said. "I thought my driver was stealing gas, but look at this." She had saved 18% on fuel. 18. I did it again for a small, independent pharmacy. Suburban Scripts, optimizing their home delivery route for medications. Their result? 24% fuel savings and a 30% increase in on-time deliveries. They were not backtracking across town. Their patients were happier. The aha moment was intoxicating. It was clean. It was pure math. I had taken chaos and given it an answer. Henderson noticed the change in me. I was quieter at the dispatch desk, more focused. I was handling the daily fires, but my mind was elsewhere. He decided to test me. "Whitaker," he barked one Monday morning, dropping 2 thick files on my desk. "You are off the local board. You are taking these 2 cross-country loads, high value. One is electronics to Seattle. One is medical supplies to Miami. They are your problem from the minute they leave this yard until they sign the bill of lading. Do not screw it up." This was the major league, not a van full of flowers, 2 18-wheelers, 4,000 miles of road, and a combined cargo value of probably $2 million. I just nodded. "Yes, sir." I ran the routes through Swift lines. Of course, I printed the manifests, but I knew the tool was only as good as the process wrapped around it. Henderson ran on gut. I would run on procedure. That night, I wrote my first standard operating procedures. I did not call them that. I just called it the checklist. It was simple. 1. Driver check-in every 15 minutes via text or satellite comms when out of cell range. A simple, all okay, code 10-4. Silence was not an option. 2. Temperature log for the Miami reefer unit. The driver had to physically check the temperature setting and cargo temp every 4 hours, at every stop, and send a photo of the thermostat. 3. Digital key seals. We were using cheap plastic tags. I found a company that sold serialized, digitally tracked seals. I ordered a box with my own money. If that seal number did not match at the destination, the load was compromised. I briefed the drivers. One of them, a veteran named Sal, laughed at my checklist. "Been driving 20 years. Kid, I think I know how to stay on the highway." "I am sure you do," I said, handing him the clipboard. "This is not for you. It is for the insurance. It is for the client. Sign here." He stopped laughing and signed. The moment of truth came 2 days later. Sal, the veteran driver, was in Wyoming. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. It was a check-in text, but not the one I wanted. "Pile up I-80. Dead stop. 10-mile backup. GPS says standstill. What now, boss?" 3 a.m. A high-value load. A gridlocked interstate. My heart did not even pound. This was not a family crisis. This was a math problem. I was at my laptop in 30 seconds. I had the DOT maps open, satellite weather, and Swift lines running. The official detour was already clogged. The GPS was useless. It was just telling him what he already knew. But I had been studying these maps. I had been reading the road. I texted back, "Take exit 228. Go north 2 miles. Gravel road. Old Mine RD. Not on GPS. Runs parallel to I-80 for 15 miles. Rejoins at exit 245. Road is solid. Used by ranchers. Go." A long, agonizing silence. 10 minutes. Then, "Road is here. Gates open. I'm going. Pray for my tires. 2 hours later. I'm past it. Clean highway. You are a witch, Whitaker. Sal made his Seattle delivery 12 hours early, the Miami truck, following my strict temperature logs, arrived perfectly. The clients were thrilled. Henderson just grunted, but he put me in charge of all cross-country high-value loads. That was when I had my first big win inside the warehouse. We had a critical shipment, auto parts for a new car model, that had to be in Detroit, but our components were arriving from a supplier on a truck that was always late, always stuck in morning traffic. It made our entire assembly line wait. The warehouse manager, a guy named Murph, was a bulldog. "Not my problem," he growled. "I load 'em when I get 'em. My guys are here from 8 to 5. "Murph," I said, catching him at the coffee machine, "your guys are here from 8 to 5, but the truck is stuck in traffic from 7 to 9. We are paying your team to drink coffee for 2 hours waiting for a late truck, and we are paying the supplier's driver to sit in traffic. Everyone loses." He glared at me. "So what, genius?" "So let us change the clock," I said. I talked to the supplier. Their driver is willing. Instead of an 8 a.m. load, let us schedule it for 6 a.m. Your warehouse dock is empty. The highways are empty. Their driver is in and out in 20 minutes. Your guys come in at 8, and the parts are already on the floor, ready to be picked. I ran the numbers. It saves us $4,000 a day in man-hour overlap. Murph was silent. He hated new ideas, but he loved saving money. 6 a.m., he grumbled. "Once. We try it once." It worked. It worked so well it became the new standard. I had not just solved a route. I had bent the schedules of 2 different companies to my logic. I had optimized time itself. Swiftlines was growing. After the success with the flower shop and the pharmacy, word spread among small business owners. I was no longer doing it for free. I set up a real company, Swiftlines LLC. I built a simple website. I charged a small monthly fee. My first clients were a local bakery, a linen supply company, and a catering business. They were the small fish, but they were loyal. They were paying me. By the end of the year, I had 70 paying subscribers. 70 small businesses were running their daily operations on my algorithms. I was making more from my side project than I was from my dispatch job. I was running 2 full-time lives, dispatcher by day, CEO by night. During this time, I made a decision. The name I was using at Harborspan and on my apartment lease was Noelle Hale, my mother's maiden name. It was what Marla had started calling me, a subtle way of separating me from my half-sister. It was time to cut that, too. I went to the courthouse. It was a surprisingly simple process. I filed the paperwork, paid the fee, and legally changed my name. I took back my father's name, the name of the man who smelled like sawdust. I was Noelle Whitaker. It was not just a reclamation. It was an amputation. I was cutting away the last infected piece of my old life. I told no one from my family. I changed my number. I deleted my old, unused social media. As far as Renfield was in, as far as Lydia, Marla, and Savannah were concerned, Noelle Hale had simply evaporated. I was building a new identity, one forged in diesel, data, and discipline. I still had a lot to learn about the road. The maps could tell you the what, but not the why. For that, I needed a different kind of mentor. His name was Hank Doyle. Hank was a long-haul driver, a legend at Harborspan. He had driven over 3 million miles without a major accident. He was in his late 50s, with a face like a worn leather glove and a voice that sounded like gravel pouring over rocks. He did not trust my algorithms. He called my SOPs desk jockey nonsense. "Your map tells you the road is clear," he said to me one day, pointing at my screen. "But it does not tell you that the DOT inspector at that way station just had a fight with his wife and is going to tear apart every truck that looks at him wrong. Your map does not tell you that the wind on that particular stretch of I-80 can flip an empty trailer." "So how do you know?" I asked. "You read the road, kid," he said. "Same way you read a person. You look for the signs. You listen to the chatter. You feel the rhythm of it. Hank became my secret professor. I would buy him coffee, and he would talk. He taught me the unwritten rules. He taught me that a sudden cluster of trucks pulling over meant an undeclared speed trap or a bad accident up ahead. Long before it hit the radio, he taught me which truck stops had the cleanest showers and which ones had the mechanics who would not cheat you. He taught me to read the human element in the system. Every driver has a tell, he said. This guy always speeds the last 100 miles, trying to get home. This one always takes a longer break than he logs. Your system is smart, Noel, but it is not wise, not yet. I started building Hank's wisdom into my code. I added variables for human factors. I created alerts based on driver psychology, not just geography. My goal was crystallizing. It was not about the money. The 70 subscribers were nice. The paycheck from Henderson was essential. But this was not about getting rich. I had seen what rich looked like in my family. It looked like Marla's polished emptiness and Savannah's casual cruelty. No, this was about something else. It was about control. It was about knowing that a truck in Wyoming was safe, because I had checked a map and a driver in Miami was not losing his cargo because I had written a checklist. It was about bending a multi-million-dollar system to my will. Not with charm or influence, but with cold, hard, undeniable logic. I was not just drawing the maps anymore. I was building the entire navigation system, and I was the only one with the administrator password. I had not been back to Renfield in 10 years. 10 years since the smell of diesel fumes and the greasy orange glow of the bus stop streetlight. In that time, I had built Swiftlines from a command line interface on a rattling laptop into a multi-state logistics engine. I was no longer Noel Hale, the library ghost. I was Noel Whitaker, the CEO of Swiftlines LLC. I had not reached out to my family. I had not looked back. I had been erased from their ledger, and I had simply opened my own. The past, however, has its own supply chain. It finds a way to deliver itself, whether you have optimized a route for it or not. Last winter, a severe ice storm, a once-in-a-decade blizzard, the news called it, hit the Ohio Valley. It shut down the I-70 and I-80 corridors. Renfield and the surrounding counties were paralyzed. The power grid failed. The roads were impassable. Except, I had already mapped the vulnerabilities. Swiftlines had been running simulations on severe weather impacts for 2 years, while the state emergency services were scrambling. My system was already rerouting emergency supplies, generators, medical oxygen, heating fuel, through a network of pre-cleared secondary roads, old farm routes, and industrial access paths that were not on any public GPS. We coordinated with the local authorities, using my network, which was faster and more accurate than theirs. We got convoys moving when nothing else was. The Renfield Gazette, the local paper, ran a story. Local genius or logistics wizard. How Swiftlines kept the lights on. They did not have a current photo of me, so they used my old high school yearbook picture from a decade ago. It was a jarring, almost comical mismatch to the woman I had become, the face of a girl who still thought she needed permission. But the name was there, Noel. The connection was made. 2 weeks later, an email appeared in my inbox. It was not from my main work address. It was from a forwarded account I rarely checked. A digital breadcrumb I had left behind years ago, just in case. The sender was Elaine, my Aunt Elaine, Lydia's younger sister. She was always the quiet one, the one who seemed perpetually uncomfortable at family gatherings, fidgeting with her bracelets, and never quite meeting anyone's eye. The subject line was simple, reunion. The message was short, Noel. It has been a long time, 10 years. The family is holding a reunion at the Renfield Country Club. A celebration of, well, a celebration. I know we have not been in touch, but I would like it if you came, please. The date was set for a Saturday, 6 weeks out. My first instinct was to press delete, to archive the past. My finger hovered over the key. Why would I go back? I had nothing to prove to them. I was not the girl they left at the bus stop. But Hank Doyle's voice echoed in my head. You read the road. kid. You look for the signs." This was a sign. It was not an invitation. It was a data point. Marla and Savannah would never have approved this message. This was Elaine acting alone, or she was acting on instructions from someone else. The silence from my mother and Marla was louder than Elaine's email. They had seen the article, they knew I was successful, and now they were pretending I did not exist, while my aunt reached out in secret. The air in my office felt strange, charged. The hum of my servers, usually a comfort, sounded like a warning. A storm was building back home, and they were trying to decide if I was part of the storm or part of the shelter. I replied with one word: confirmed. I did not just confirm, I began to plan a route. The Renfield Country Club. I remembered it. It was the epitome of their world. A sprawling, white-pillared building that smelled of old money, cut grass, and decades of exclusion. I had been there once, for a Christmas party when I was 12. I was told to wait in the kitchen with the staff's children. Now they were inviting me back as a guest. I went to the club's website. They were advertising the Hale Family 10-year reunion gala. It was a public-facing event, a performance of family unity. They were accepting corporate sponsorships. Of course they were. Marla loved a logo. I created a new entity in my financials, a philanthropic arm of Swift Lines. I called it the Map Back Initiative. Its stated goal was funding infrastructure and opportunity in overlooked Midwestern communities. I sent the club's event coordinator an email from an anonymous address linked to the initiative. I offered to become the event's sole, anonymous benefactor. The amount I offered was significant, enough to cover the entire event: the ballroom, the open bar, the string quartet, the prime rib, twice over. The money was accepted within an hour. My only condition was that the sponsorship remain anonymous. A simple sign must be placed at the entrance. Tonight's celebration is made possible by a generous grant from the Map Back Initiative. I was not just attending the party, I was buying the stage it was being performed on. The night of the reunion, I did not drive myself. I hired a black car service, the kind usually reserved for executives flying into the city. I wanted the cold, impersonal anonymity of a professional driver. I chose my outfit with the precision of a logistician. I wore no loud colors, no desperate fashion. I wore a sheath dress of heavy dove-gray silk. It was exquisitely tailored, but it whispered. It did not shout. My only jewelry was a single strand of small real pearls, my first major purchase after Swift Lines turned a profit, and my father's old watch, which I had repaired. My hair was pulled back into a simple, severe knot. I looked like a balance sheet, incorruptible, final. The car pulled up the long, tree-lined drive of the Renfield Country Club. The white pillars were lit from below, making the building look like a marble tomb. The driver opened my door. I stepped out. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of expensive perfume. I walked into the lobby, and there, as requested, was the sign, a large, easel-backed placard in gold script. Tonight's celebration is made possible by a generous grant from the Map Back Initiative. I heard the whispers immediately. Map Back? Never heard of it. Must be one of those new tech funds. I heard it was someone from the coast, trying to buy property. Franklin's idea. Probably. He is always quiet about his money. I walked past them. The ballroom was loud. A string quartet was playing something bright and forgettable. Champagne was flowing. And then I saw them. Marla and Savannah were standing near the grand staircase, a match set. They were both wearing identical shades of winter white. Their dresses were covered in intricate beading that caught the light, making them shimmer like hostile angels. Their hair was professionally coiffed. Their laughter was loud, sharp, and perfectly timed. It was, as it had always been, the standard-defining laughter of the people who knew they owned the room. Savannah saw me first. Her smile froze. Just for a second, the shimmer dimmed. She nudged Marla. Marla turned. Her eyes, cold, assessing, swept over me. From my simple shoes to my simple dress to my simple hair, I saw the calculation. She was trying to place me. She saw the quality of the silk. She saw the pearls. She could not reconcile the image in her head, the girl on the bus stop, with the woman standing in front of her. I did not approach them. I went to the bar and ordered a club soda. I watched. Aunt Elaine found me. She looked older, her face lined with a worry I did not remember. She was holding a large, structured, vintage handbag. It looked heavy. It was a classic label, but looked out of place with her nervous energy. She held it clutched in front of her with both hands, like a shield. "Noelle," she whispered, her voice breathy. "You came." "You invited me, Aunt Elaine?" "Yes, but... Oh, it is good to see you." She looked around, nervously, her grip tightening on the purse. "Things are... complicated." "They always were," I said. Before she could reply, my mother, Lydia, drifted over. She was flanked by Marla, who had clearly decided on a strategy. Lydia looked at me. Her face was a mask of polite confusion, as if looking at a stranger who vaguely resembled someone she once knew. "And you are..." she began, her voice trailing off, airy and thin. Marla jumped in, her voice like chilled steel. "This is one of the... sponsors, Lydia. From that map company? The one from the snowstorm. How kind of you to come." She did not use my name. She had reduced me to a weather event, a map company. It was a deliberate, public erasure. I just smiled. "It is Noelle, Mother, Noelle Whitaker." Lydia flinched at the name. Whitaker, my father's name, the name I had reclaimed. "Oh," Lydia said, touching her throat. "Yes, of course." She turned away, suddenly fascinated by a floral arrangement. The cold front was absolute. The party continued. The whispers about the Map Back initiative grew louder. It was the night's central mystery. Then, the main doors opened, and a different kind of silence fell. My grandfather, Franklin Hale, walked in. He was the source, the headwater of the family's wealth. He had turned his father's massive, failing farmlands into one of the state's first and largest wind farms. Hale Wind Company. He was old money and new energy. He was also the only person Marla ever seemed to quiet down for. He was in his 80s, tall and thin as a reed, but his presence filled the room. He used a heavy wooden cane. He did not lean on it. He commanded the floor with it. His eyes were pale blue, and they missed nothing. He walked past Marla and Savannah. He nodded at Lydia. He stopped about 10 feet away from me, near the anonymous sponsor sign. He read it. Then he looked at me. He just looked. He did not smile. He did not frown. He was, I realized, an engineer of a different sort. He was assessing a system. The MC, a local radio personality hired for the event, tapped the microphone. "Friends, family," his voice boomed. "Welcome. Before we begin the toasts, we have a very special, very mysterious benefactor to thank tonight, the Map Back Initiative. We had no idea who it was, but they have been so generous, so supportive of the Hale family." He scanned the crowd, a practiced smile on his face. "I know they requested anonymity," he said, "but we have just been told that the representative for the initiative is, in fact, here with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, would the representative from the Map Back Initiative please come forward and say a few words?" A nervous silence fell. The string quartet stopped playing. This was not part of my plan. I had bought the stage, but I had not intended to stand on it. I looked at Aunt Elaine. Her face was pale. She was clutching her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. I looked at Marla, who looked annoyed by the interruption. I looked at my grandfather, Franklin. He was still looking at me, and then, very slowly, he nodded. Just once, a slight, almost imperceptible dip of his chin. It was not a request. It was permission. It was a move on the board. The MC looked around. "Anyone? No? Maybe I got the information wrong." I set my club soda down on a tray. I took a step forward. And another. I walked out of the shadows by the bar and into the center of the room. into the spotlight that was scanning the crowd. The whispers stopped. The only sound was the clack of my own heels on the parquet floor. I reached the microphone. The MC looked at me, confused. Marla's face had turned to stone. Savannah looked like she had swallowed a wasp. I leaned toward the microphone. "Thank you," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. It was calm, clear, and amplified. "I am the representative." The MC fumbled. "Oh, wonderful, and you are?" The entire room was holding its breath. I looked at Lydia. I looked at Marla. Then I said my name, the real one, the one I had earned, and the one I had reclaimed. "My name is Noelle Whitaker." The air left the room. It was not a gasp. It was a vacuum. The entire hall had stopped breathing. I stepped forward into the silence. The vacuum of my name, my father's name, had sucked all the air, all the polite chatter. Out of the room, I could feel 100 pairs of eyes on me, each one a pinprick of calculation. Marla's face was a study in pale, controlled shock. Savannah looked bored and annoyed, as if I were a waiter who had brought the wrong wine. My mother, Lydia, just looked through me, her gaze fixed on a point on the wall somewhere over my left shoulder. I reached the microphone. I adjusted it slightly, the small movement echoing in the stillness. "I am a logistician. I do not do drama. I do reports. This would be a report." "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady. It did not tremble. I had briefed hostile trucking unions and cynical warehouse managers. This was just a room full of people wearing silk. It seems my anonymity was short-lived. I let the fact of my presence, my identity as the benefactor, settle over them. I was not the poor, forgotten relative. I was the sponsor. I owned the stage. "It is customary on nights like this to thank people," I continued, my voice calm, projecting just enough to fill the space without shouting. "So, I would like to thank everyone who ever believed in me." I paused, letting the empty space hang in the air, a silent tribute to the people who were not in that room, to Mrs. Romero, to Hank Doyle. "But more importantly," I said, my gaze sweeping the front rows, landing for a brief, clinical moment on Marla, "I would like to thank those who did not." A ripple went through the crowd, a nervous cough, a shifted weight on a squeaky floorboard. "You see, belief is a comfort. It is warm. It is a nice to have. But doubt is a motivator. Doubt is a cold, clean fire. It forces you to build your own engine, to draw your own maps, to verify your own routes. Belief requires faith. Doubt demands proof." I looked out at the faces, the cousins, the old neighbors, the people who had watched me grow up in the margins. Doubt is the superior fuel. It burns hotter, and it burns longer. It forces precision. So, to those of you who doubted, I gave a small, crisp nod. "Thank you. You gave me the incentive I needed." Now the pivot. This was not a personal speech. It was a corporate announcement. The Map Back Initiative, which I founded, was not created to sponsor galas. This was a special exception. The initiative has a singular, stated purpose: to fund the next generation of problem solvers. We find the people who, like me, understand that the world is a complex system and that efficiency is its own form of justice. I saw Marla's head snap up. I saw Lydia's hand go to the pearls at her throat. "Tonight," I said, my tone shifting to that of a CEO, "I am officially announcing our flagship program. We call it the Bus Stop Grant." The name landed. I felt the impact. It was a clean, surgical cut. I saw Marla's posture stiffen. I saw Lydia's eyes finally focus on me, wide and wounded. "This grant is not sentimental," I continued, my voice deliberately flat. "It is a practical investment. It provides a full-ride scholarship, tuition, housing, and a living stipend for any young person in this state who is aging out of the foster system or who finds themselves, at the age of 18, with no family support and no place to sleep." I was specific. I was clinical. I was not telling a story. I was defining a target demographic. "The conditions are transparent," We are not looking for emotional essays on leadership. We are looking for aptitude. We are looking for the kids who are already logisticians. They just do not know the word for it. The ones who know every city bus schedule by heart. The ones who know which shelters serve the hot meals and which libraries have the fastest internet. We are looking for the people who understand, fundamentally, how to survive an inefficient and often hostile system. The silence in the room was now absolute. It was no longer shock. It was a heavy, suffocating pressure. I have some personal experience in this area, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, a calculated change in pitch to ensure they leaned in. I know, for example, what it feels like to stand at a suburban bus stop on a humid night, right after graduation, and realize that the abstract concept of being an adult has just become a very practical, very cold reality. I did not point. I did not raise my voice. I did not name them. I was a narrator, stating a fact. That is the moment you learn to optimize. That is the moment you realize that the network you thought you were a part of has just declared your cargo non-essential. I looked directly at my mother. Lydia. That is the moment you learn to draw your own maps. I finished. I had delivered my report. The MC, who had been frozen at the side of the stage, looked pale. He had wanted a party, and I had delivered a post-mortem. Then, from the back of the ballroom, someone began to clap. It was not a relative. It was one of the club's managers, a woman in a black blazer, standing by the service door. It was a slow, steady clap. Then another person joined, a man I did not recognize, a local businessman perhaps, and then, suddenly, the room was filled with applause. It was not warm, it was not joyful, it was stunned, obligatory applause. It was the sound of a system acknowledging a new, undeniable force. It was the sound of 100 people recalculating my position in their social order. I saw the relatives, the aunts and uncles who had been at that graduation party. Their hands were moving, but their eyes were darting to Marla. They were looking for their cue. But Marla was frozen. Her face was a mask of controlled fury, a faint, mottled flush rising on her neck. She had been outmaneuvered, and she knew it. I had not cried. I had not yelled. I had used her own event, her own stage, my stage. I had paid for it, to deliver a corporate press release that had simultaneously exposed her and elevated me, all without raising my voice. Savannah was less composed. She leaned over to a bewildered uncle, her voice a carrying whisper of venom. It is a publicity stunt. She is just trying to get public sympathy. How pathetic. Her words were brittle, a paper-thin defense. She was rattled. I had redefined power in this room. Theirs was built on exclusion, whispers, and social agreements. Mine was built on capital, procedures, and a 10-year-old $10 bill. I looked at Lydia, my mother. She was still holding her wine glass, a full-bodied red. Her hand was shaking. I watched as a single drop of wine spilled over the rim, a tiny, dark crimson tear that landed on the perfect white silk of her dress. She did not notice. She just stared at the spreading stain, her eyes wide, as if she had just watched the first drop of blood fall. And my grandfather, Franklin Hale. He had not moved from his spot by the sponsor sign. He had not clapped. He had not flinched. He was just watching me, his pale blue eyes magnified slightly by his glasses. He was not looking at me with shock or anger. He was looking at me with an expression that was far more terrifying. Assessment. It was not the look of a grandfather. It was the look of a CEO evaluating a potential acquisition or a rival. He was measuring me. He was calculating my tensile strength, my motives, my next move. He was, I realized, the only other engineer in the room, and he had just seen my design. I stepped back from the microphone. "Thank you," I said simply. The applause died, ragged and uncertain. The string quartet looked terrified, unsure if they should start playing again. The MC, desperate to regain control of his shipwrecked event, rushed forward. "Wow," his voice boomed, falsely bright. "Thank you," Thank you. Ms. Whitaker, what an inspiring story, and what a truly generous donation to this evening. Let's have another round of applause for Ms. Whitaker. This time, the clapping was thin, a polite spatter of people grateful for a new set of instructions. And now, the MC shouted, his face slick with sweat. What better way to celebrate this reunion, than with a family photo? The Hale family, all of you, up here, photographer, get ready. It was a train wreck in slow motion. He was trying to knit together what I had just surgically severed. A photographer bustled forward, Marla and Savannah, seizing the chance to re-establish the hierarchy, moved instantly to the center. They flanked the empty space where Franklin Hale was supposed to stand. Marla grabbed Lydia's arm, pulling her into place. My mother looked like a dazed, compliant doll. My grandfather, Franklin, began to move slowly, deliberately, with his cane. I did not move. This was not my picture. I was an observer. I turned to walk back to the shadows of the bar. And Ms. Whitaker, the MC called out, his voice cracking with desperation. You must be in it too. Our benefactor, the guest of honor. Marla turned, her smile a thin, painted slash. Oh, do not be silly, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, loud enough for the first few rows to hear. This is for the family. Noelle understands. She is a guest. It was the final cut, the last, public attempt to edit me out. You are not one of us. You are a guest. You are the help. I stopped. I looked at her. The air crackled. I was about to give a cold, polite refusal, the one that would end this farce, when a different voice cut through. Nonsense. It was Aunt Elaine. She was still clutching her heavy, vintage handbag. She stepped forward, her usual nervousness replaced by a brittle, surprising anger. She is Lydia's daughter, Elaine said, her voice shaking but clear. She is Evan's daughter. She belongs in this picture more than most. She walked directly to me. She put her hand on my shoulder, her grip surprisingly firm. Her hand was trembling, but she did not back down. Come on, she said. She physically walked me to the center of the group, pushing past a bewildered Savannah who stumbled back a step. She did not just put me in the photo. She put me right in the middle, next to the spot where Franklin would stand. You stand right here, Noelle, she said, her voice low and fierce. Marla looked apoplectic. Her face was white with rage, her perfect lipstick a wound. Savannah looked like she had been slapped. Lydia just looked at the parquet floor, a silent, vibrating ghost. My grandfather, Franklin Hale, finally reached the group. He looked at the new, chaotic arrangement. He looked at Marla's fury. He looked at Elaine's sudden, defiant defense, and he looked at me, standing in the center. He took his spot, not next to Marla. On the other side of me, I was now standing directly between Franklin Hale, the source of the family's power, and Aunt Elaine, its nervous secret keeper. The photographer, a professional who sensed this was his only moment, raised his camera. Okay, everyone, look here. Smile. Marla forced a smile so tight it looked like a scream. Savannah glowered, refusing to look at the lens. Lydia was a blur of misery. I did not smile. I did not glower. I just looked at the camera. Calm, assessed, present. The flashbulb popped, a brilliant, blinding white explosion. It was a new composition. The old hierarchy was shattered, and this new, awkward, volatile arrangement had just been captured, frozen in a single, high-resolution image. The family, reorganized by a single speech, was now on record. The flashbulb died, leaving green spots in my vision. The photographer, looking rattled, muttered, "Got it. That is, great." The forced tableau broke apart immediately. It was like a magnetic field had been switched off. The components flew to their respective corners. Savannah visibly shuddered, wiping her shoulder as if Aunt Elaine's proximity had soiled her white dress. Marla, her face a mask of Arctic fury, turned her back on me and started signaling furiously for a waiter, demanding champagne, as if volume could reset the room to her specifications. The string quartet, taking the cue, nervously began to saw at their instruments again. The noise returned, but it was thinner now, brittle. The party was a cracked mirror, still reflecting light but fundamentally broken. I stood there for a moment, caught in the wake. Aunt Elaine had disappeared, melting back toward the edges of the room, still clutching her heavy handbag. My grandfather, Franklin Hale, was studying the sponsor sign again, his back to me, lost in thought. I had won the skirmish, the public acknowledgement, but the photo had been an act of aggression, a forced rearrangement, and the system was now pushing back. I turned to get my club soda. I never made it. Marla was in front of me. She had moved with a speed that belied her polished exterior, cutting off my path to the bar. She did not just approach me, she cornered me, using the angle of the wall and a large decorative urn to create a pocket. We were shielded from the main floor, but not invisible. Her scent, the sharp citrus, was overpowering, an olfactory assault. Her eyes were not angry, they were dead, the polished blue of a ceramic doll. "You are clever," she whispered, her voice a low hiss, perfectly modulated so only I could hear. That little speech, the bus stop grant, a pathetic, transparent play for sympathy. I said nothing. I am an engineer. When a component malfunctions, you do not argue with it, you observe it, you note its failure state. Her smile was gone. This was the real Marla, the one who operated the levers behind the scenes. You think you can walk back in here, 10 years later, flashing a few dollars you clearly do not know how to spend. She gestured at my simple gray dress. And that it saves you? That it erases what you are? "What am I?" I asked. My voice was quiet, curious. I was collecting data. "You are an afterthought," she hissed. "A footnote to my family. You are your father's mistake, and Lydia's burden. You do not belong here. You never did." "And yet," I said, "you are talking to me, in a corner, at a party I paid for." I saw the flash of impact in her eyes. The truth. It hit her. "You will always be the second-rate name, Noelle." A new voice, higher, sharper, Savannah. She had glided up beside her mother, a perfect, pale echo. "You can buy all the sponsorships you want. You can change your name, wear pearls. It does not matter. You are still the girl from the wrong side of the family tree. You are Charity, and everyone here knows it." She smiled, that effortless, cruel smile that had defined my childhood. "We just let you have your little moment with the microphone. It was adorable." "Savannah, Marla, stop." It was Aunt Elaine. She had reappeared, her face pale and damp with nervous perspiration. She was standing just outside our triangle, her hands clamped so tightly on the large vintage purse that her knuckles were white stones. The bag was held against her chest like body armor. "This is not the place," Elaine pleaded, her eyes darting from Marla to me. Marla turned on her. The full force of her rage, which had been simmering under the ice, now found its true target. "You," Marla spat. "This is your fault. You brought her here. You arranged this whole disgusting performance. You and him." "I just invited her to the family," Elaine stammered. "She is not family," Marla shouted. The noise level in the ballroom dipped. People were turning. Marla did not care. She had lost control of the narrative, and now she was losing control of herself. "What is in that bag?" "Elaine," Marla demanded, her eyes narrowing. "You have been guarding that thing all night like it is the crown jewels. What did he give you? What secrets are you two whispering about?" "It is nothing," Elaine said, trying to back away. "It is just personal." "Liar," Marla lunged. It was fast. Not a punch, not a slap. It was a grab. Marla's hand shot out, her nails digging into Elaine's forearm, trying to rip the purse away from her. "Give it to me!" "No!" Elaine screamed, twisting away. "Marla, do not!" It was a desperate, ugly struggle, a tangle of white silk and nervous tweed. Marla yanked. Elaine held on. The physics of the moment were inevitable. Elaine's grip was weaker. Marla's pull was violent. The bag, heavy and structured, was ripped from Elaine's grasp. It did not just drop. It flew. It swung in a low, heavy arc. I saw it coming. I had a fraction of a second. I could have moved, stepped back, but I was, as I have always been, an observer. I was frozen, analyzing the trajectory. The purse connected with my shoulder. The sound was not a slap. It was a solid, dry thud. The sound of a heavy textbook being dropped on a wooden floor, a dead, definitive thwack. The strap caught my collarbone, and the heavy leather body of the bag slammed into the muscle of my upper arm. Pain, sharp and surprising, shot down to my elbow. The bag fell to the floor, landing with a heavy final thump. Silence. This was not the shocked vacuum of my speech. This was a system crash. The string quartet's music died mid-note, a violin screeching into the void. The MC, who had been moving toward us, froze with one foot in the air. A waiter, holding a tray of champagne flutes, stood motionless. I saw it all in high definition. Savannah's hand was at her mouth, her eyes wide with something new. Shock. Actual, unfeigned shock. Aunt Elaine was hyperventilating, her hands fluttering at her chest, her eyes locked on the bag on the floor. And Marla. Marla was staring at her own hand, the one she had used to yank the bag. She was staring at it as if it were a foreign object, a snake that had just struck without her permission. She had crossed a line, not a moral line, but a social one. She had used violence, messy, public, physical violence, in the middle of the Renfield Country Club. She had lost control. I did not move. I did not rub my shoulder, though it was throbbing, a deep, hot ache. I did not cry out. I did not even blink. I simply looked at Marla. I held her gaze. I did not look at her with anger. I did not look at her with pain. I looked at her, as Hank Doyle had taught me to look at a faulty component on a manifest. I looked at her with pure, cold, clinical assessment. I saw her. I saw her panic. I saw her desperation. I saw the error in her code. My silence, my stillness, was a mirror. It reflected her action back at her, amplified. I was the unmoving object. She was the uncontrolled force that had just shattered itself against me. A woman in the corner gasped. A club employee, a man in a black suit, began to move forward, his hand on his earpiece, his face grim. "Ma'am," he began. Tap. The sound cut through the absolute silence. Tap. It was the sound of my grandfather's wooden cane on the parquet floor. Heavy, measured. Tap. He moved from his position by the sign, walking with that slow, deliberate pace. He did not look at the crowd. He did not look at the concerned staff. He walked directly into the center of our toxic triangle. He stopped. He looked down at the handbag on the floor. He looked at Marla's terrified face. He looked at Elaine's tear-streaked one. Then his pale blue eyes, the eyes of an engineer, met mine. My shoulder was burning, but my gaze was steady. We held the look. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was the same nod from before my speech. Proceed. He turned his gaze from me to the floor. His voice was not loud, but it carried the absolute authority of a lifetime of command. It was the voice of the man who owned the wind. "Open the bag." The words hung in the air. Simple, clear, an order. Marla's head snapped up. The shock was replaced by a flicker of her old defiance. "What?" she stammered. "Dad, are you kidding me? It is just a purse. It was an accident." "It is not a request, Marla," Franklin said. His voice was flat. Aunt Elaine let out a small sob. "Franklin, please, not here, not like this. Are you sure?" She was looking at him, pleading. My grandfather did not look at her. He kept his eyes on the bag, as if it were a puzzle box he had just solved. "It is time," he said. He bent, with a slight grunt, and used the hook of his cane to slide the bag across the floor, stopping it at my feet. "Noelle," he said, "open it." Marla took a step forward. "No, you cannot." "Marla." His voice was iron. She stopped. I looked down. The bag was at my feet. It was vintage, beautifully made. The clasp was a simple, old-fashioned brass fixture. The entire ballroom was holding its breath. The silence was so deep, so absolute. It felt like we were at the bottom of the ocean. I knelt. My shoulder protested. A sharp spike of pain. But I ignored it. I put my fingers on the brass clasp. It was cold. I pressed the two sides together. Click. The sound was as loud as a gunshot in the dead silence. The clasp sprang open. The mouth of the purse gaped. The entire room, the entire axis of my old life, shifted. We had all just dropped into a different level of reality. I knelt on the floor of the Renfield Country Club. The throb in my shoulder was a distant signal, a data point from a failing sensor. I ignored it. All my focus was on the open mouth of my Aunt Elaine's handbag. The silence in the room was a physical weight. I could hear the hum of a wine cooler from the bar, the sound of a single, nervous cough from the back of the room. Every eye was on me, on the bag. I did not reach in and rummage. I tipped the bag forward. Just enough. The contents were not a jumble of keys and cosmetics. It was an organized archive, a series of thick manila envelopes, neatly stacked. My fingers, steady, drew out the first one. It was heavy, 9 by 12, and sealed with a blue wax stamp I did not recognize. It was addressed simply to Elaine Hale. My name was nowhere on it. I broke the seal. The sound of the paper tearing was unnaturally loud. I slid the documents out. It was not a letter. It was a legal filing. I scanned the header, my eyes moving fast, trained to find the key data. Supplementary codicil to the last will and testament of Franklin Hale. A murmur, like wind in dry leaves, passed through the room. "This is a notarized copy," I said, my voice clear and flat, addressing no one in particular. I was simply reading a manifest. Dated 3 months ago. I read the operative clause aloud. "All assets, real and financial, previously held by Hale Wind Company, are to be hereby transferred, effective upon my incapacitation or death, into a newly formed irrevocable trust, the Hale Integrity Trust." Marla made a small sound, a choked gasp. She knew, as I was beginning to understand, that assets in an irrevocable trust are untouchable. They cannot be contested, cajoled, or rewritten by a new will. The game was already over. This document was just the minutes of the meeting. I placed the codicil on the floor and reached for the second envelope. This one was thinner, a standard business envelope. Inside was a single, heavy bond share transfer agreement. Again, I read the key lines. "Agreement to transfer stock," I said. "From Hale Wind Co." I turned the page. "The undersigned, Franklin Hale, does hereby grant and convey a non-dilutable stake of—" I paused, verifying the number. 22% of all voting shares in Hale Wind Co. 2. I stopped, my breath caught, not in a gasp, but a stall. "To whom?" Savannah's voice was sharp, a cracking whip of impatience. I looked up. I looked past Marla, past Savannah. I looked at my grandfather. He was watching me, his face impassive. I looked back down at the paper. "To Noelle Whitaker." The name landed in the room with the force of a physical blow. 22%. Not a gift, not an inheritance, a controlling stake, second only to Franklin's own. "It includes," I continued, reading the fine print, "full governance conditions, a permanent seat on the board, and unilateral authority over all supply chain and logistics contracts." It was not a gift. It was a job, a hostile takeover disguised as a share transfer. I set the document beside the first. The crowd was no longer silent. A low, shocked buzz had started, the sound of 100 different social calculations being run at once. I reached for the third item. It was not an envelope. It was a small, clear plastic sleeve. Inside was a single, black USB flash drive. "What is that?" Marla whispered. "What is that, Franklin?" I held it up. "There is a label," I said. "It reads, Independent Audit, S.H. Personal Accounts, FY 2023 to 2025. Savannah, who had been sneering, went rigid. Her face, which had been bored and cruel, suddenly became the face of a cornered animal. "H?" she said, her voice too high. "That is not me. That could be anyone." "It specifies the account," I said, reading the sublabel. "The Grandmother's Legacy Supplemental Credit Card, issued to Savannah Hale." "That is private," Savannah shrieked, taking a step forward. "That is family business. You cannot." "It appears to be an audit," I said, my voice cold. "A spreadsheet is visible in the file directory. It lists transactions." I tipped the drive, reading the summary notes attached to the back. Dates, timestamps, GPS location data from the point of sale, digital signatures for receipt of goods. I looked up at Savannah. It lists preemptive advances against her inheritance, a series of purchases from boutiques in Paris, Milan, and New York, all logged during her study abroad trips, all routed through her late grandmother's account. Savannah's face was a mask of pure, white-hot panic. This was not an accusation. This was data. It was my world, my language. Irrefutable, cold, and final. I placed the USB drive on the floor. The fourth envelope, it was pale blue. It was not a business document. My blood ran cold. I knew the handwriting. It was my mother's. It was a scanned copy of a handwritten letter. The scan was high resolution. I could see the way she pressed the pen into the paper on her L's and T's. It was addressed to Marla. The date was from 6 months ago. I did not read this one aloud. I could not. My voice, for the first time, threatened to fail me. I read it to myself, my eyes scanning the flowery, looping script. "Must be handled quickly. Marla. Before the new highway survey is published. The lawyers say her parcel is technically hers from Evan, but it's worthless. That land has never been worth anything. My acquaintance from the golf club will buy it for a symbolic price. Say, $500? We can say it's to settle old tax debts. She'll never know. It will be one less loose end, one less tie to." They were planning to sell my father's land, the one tiny piece of earth he had left me, land I did not even know I still had. Not just sell it, steal it, for $500. My mother and my stepmother, colluding in ink. I felt the burn in my shoulder, a sudden, sharp spike, as if the nerves had just remembered the impact. I closed my eyes for 1 second. I did not fold the letter. I placed it, face up, on the growing pile of evidence. My mother, Lydia, was now openly weeping, her hands over her face. The fifth envelope, back to business. Thick, heavy, legal. "Power of attorney," I announced, my voice returning, but harder now, colder, durable, financial and medical, for Franklin Hale. Marla actually took a step toward it. This was the prize, the control of everything. He named me," she whispered, a desperate, frantic hope in her eyes. "He named me. I am his wife's daughter-in-law. It names his primary representative," I said, cutting her off, reading the line. "In the event of his incapacitation," I paused, "Noel Whitaker." I read the next line. "It names a secondary, co-trustee, to act only in conjunction with Ms. Whitaker's approval, Elaine Hale." Aunt Elaine, who had been crying, looked up, stunned. Marla looked as if she had been shot. She had been passed over, not just for me, but for Elaine, the nervous, quiet sister. The sixth envelope, this one I recognized. It was a receipt. It was a duplicate of the wire transfer I had initiated for the bus stop grant. "This," I said, confused, "is my foundation's receipt." "Read the co-signature," my grandfather's voice boomed. I looked at the bottom line. It was a joint grant, Map Back Initiative, and a second, anonymous co-sponsor. The name on the wire was not anonymous. It was the Hale Ridge Wind Farm. I looked at him, stunned. My grandfather looked at the assembled crowd. "A good idea," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "An excellent system. I was proud to match the funds, anonymously." He had known. He had been watching me. Not for weeks, but for months. He had seen my plan, and he had invested in it. I placed the receipt on the pile. The pile was now a complete narrative. It was a new will, a new corporate structure, a new power of attorney. It was an indictment of Savannah, a betrayal by Lydia, and a complete and total restructuring of the family, all signed and notarized. The bag was empty, almost. I reached in one last time. My fingers brushed against two things. One was metal, a heavy, old-fashioned, skeleton-style key on a simple brass tag. The tag was stamped, "Hale Vault, Originals." The other was mine. I drew my hand out. In my palm lay the vault key, and resting beside it was my $10 bill, laminated in cheap, clear plastic. The bill I had kept from the bus stop. My grandfather had not put it there. Elaine must have. But how had she— My eyes met Elaine's. She was no longer crying. She looked terrified, but resolute. The crowd was buzzing. The silence was gone, replaced by 100 frantic, whispered conversations. The family was imploding. The order that had been stable for decades, had just been derailed, completely derailed. Marla was chalk white. She was breathing in short, shallow pants, her eyes darting between the pile of documents and my grandfather. "No," Savannah suddenly screamed. Her face was mottled red. "No, it's a lie. He's senile. She's a witch. That USB." She did not lunge at me. She lunged at the evidence. Her hand, with its perfectly manicured nails, shot out, aiming for the small, black flash drive lying on the parquet floor. "Give me that!" She never touched it. A hand, large and firm, clamped down on her wrist. It was the club manager, the man in the dark suit. He had been moving toward us, silent as a shadow, ever since the impact. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and hard, "I cannot let you touch that." "Get your hands off me," Savannah shrieked, trying to twist free. "Do you know who I am?" "I know you are a guest," the manager said, his grip like steel. He looked at me, then at my grandfather, awaiting instructions. "And this is a private matter that has become a disturbance." Savannah was trapped. Marla was broken. My mother was a ghost. And I was still kneeling. I was the calm center of the storm I had unleashed simply by existing, by surviving. I looked at the pile of documents, I looked at the vault key, and I looked at my $10 bill, sitting there, laminated and unimpressed, in the middle of a multi-million-dollar inheritance. I reached out my finger. I ignored the key. I ignored the legal papers. I just touched the corner of the plastic, the sharp laminated edge of my own $10 bill, my seed money, my proof of concept. The system had crashed, but my own operating code was fully intact. The chaos of the ballroom congealed. The club manager, Mr. Davies, was still holding Savannah's wrist, his grip like a high-tensile clamp. Savannah was panting, her face a mask of ugly disbelief. Marla had staggered back, catching herself on a velvet chair, her hands shaking, her eyes vacant. My mother was a silent statue of tears. My grandfather, Franklin Hale, tapped his cane once. The sound was a judgment. "Mr. Davies, thank you," he said, his voice calm. "You may release my granddaughter. I will handle this." "Sir," the manager said, his jaw tight, "there was an assault." "There was a family disagreement," Franklin corrected him, his voice flat. "It is resolved. Please, see our guests out." He then turned to the frozen, whispering crowd. "The Hale reunion is over. Thank you all for coming. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening." It was a dismissal, absolute and final. The room, sensing the raw, exposed nerves of the family, evaporated. The guests fled, their minds bursting with the story they would tell for the next decade. The MC and the photographer were already gone. The string quartet packed their instruments with frantic, silent speed. In less than 3 minutes, the grand ballroom was empty. Save for the wreckage, the only ones left were me, Franklin, a shattered Marla, a seething Savannah, a weeping Lydia, and a trembling Aunt Elaine, who was now gathering the documents from the floor, her hands shaking so badly she dropped the USB drive. "Lydia," Franklin said, his voice softer but no less firm. "Take Savannah home. Go." "But, Dad," Marla started, rising from her chair. "This does not concern you tonight, Marla," he said, not even looking at her. "You are no longer a signatory on any Hale accounts. You are a guest. Go with your daughter." The finality of it broke her. Marla simply deflated, all the polished, citrus-scented fury gone, leaving only a tired, middle-aged woman in a white dress. She and Lydia, supporting a now sobbing Savannah between them, looked like the survivors of a shipwreck, stumbling toward the exit. My grandfather watched them go. Then he turned to Elaine, who was clutching the repacked handbag to her chest. "Thank you, Elaine," he said. "You were very brave. Go get some rest. We will speak in the morning." Elaine looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and a strange, new respect. She nodded, and she, too, disappeared, leaving just the two of us. The silence returned, vast and echoing in the empty champagne-scented room. "My study," he said. He did not gesture. He just turned and began to walk. I followed him. The study was in a private wing of the club. It smelled of old leather, wood polish, and something dry and clean, like old paper. It was the smell of his power. He closed the heavy oak doors, and the faint, distant sound of the club staff cleaning up the disaster was cut off. We were in a vacuum. He walked to a sideboard, his back to me. "Drink?" "No, thank you." He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into a heavy crystal glass. He swirled it, the ice clinking. He was not drinking it. He was using it as a prop, a pacing tool. "I knew," he said, his back still to me. I waited. About the bus stop. The throb in my shoulder, which had subsided to a dull ache, flared again. "You knew?" He turned. His pale blue eyes were not assessing me now. They were looking at something far away, a decade in the past. "I knew Lydia and Marla drove you to the bus station," he said. "I knew they had packed your bag. Lydia called me, crying, an hour after it was done." "And you did nothing," I said. It was not an accusation. It was a data point I was confirming. "I did nothing," he agreed, his voice heavy. "I told myself it was discipline, misguided, but not criminal. I thought Marla was being harsh, teaching a lesson. I thought you were 18, an adult. I thought Lydia would lose her nerve and be back to fetch you before midnight." He took a sip. "I told myself it was adult business. I told myself a grandfather should not interfere between a mother and a child. I was wrong. It was the error of an old man, insulated by money. I saw a family dispute when I should have seen an abandonment. I stayed out. I regret that, deeply." He sat down in a heavy leather chair, the glass in his hand. "And then," he said, 10 years pass. The girl I had, written off, filed away as a loss, appears in the Renfield Gazette." He pointed to a framed newspaper clipping on his desk. It was my Blizzard story. "Swift Lines," he said, tapping the headline. "A logistics wizard. I saw the name. I saw the company. I saw what you had built. And I realized my error had been compounded by a decade of willful ignorance." "So you sent Elaine?" "Not yet," he said. "I am an engineer, Noel. I do not act on sentiment. I act on data. The article made me curious, so I ordered an audit." He leaned forward. "I hired one of the best forensic accounting firms in Chicago. I did not just have them look at you. I had them look at everyone. I wanted a complete systems analysis of my own family. I wanted to know where every dollar I had ever earned was going. The pieces clicked into place. The USB drive, the letter. The results, he said, were clarifying. I learned that my granddaughter, Savannah, had been systematically defrauding her grandmother's legacy account for almost 3 years. I learned that my daughter, Lydia, and my daughter-in-law, Marla, were colluding to sell off your father's land for a symbolic $500 to a friend, to hide it. He looked at me, his eyes sharp, and then, I got the file on you. Noelle Whitaker. He paused, as if savoring this part. It was the most beautiful file I have ever read. It was clean, pristine, no debts to the family, no requests for money, no shadow accounts, just a legal name change. You took your father's name back. A good choice? And the steady, meticulous, upward trending financials of a business you had built from absolute zero, from that $10 bill? I flinched. Elaine? Elaine told me the story of the $10, he confirmed. You were the only one, in a family of open, grasping hands. Yours was the only one that was closed, holding a tool. You were not waiting for an inheritance. You were building an enterprise. So you changed the will. I decommissioned the old system, he corrected. The old will was a handout. I created a corporation, the Hale Integrity Trust. I put everything in it. The farms, the wind turbines, the stock, and I wrote a new set of rules. He smiled, a thin, cold smile. A morality clause. I am an old-fashioned man. The trust stipulates that any beneficiary found to be acting in deceit, engaging in fraud, or committing acts of bad faith against another beneficiary forfeits their share, instantly and irrevocably. So tonight, he said, Savannah and Marla, in one single, public display, triggered their own disinheritance clauses. They did it to themselves. The audit was the proof. Their actions tonight were the signature. And Aunt Elaine? I needed a repository, he said. Someone inside the family who saw everything, but who everyone underestimated. Someone loyal. Elaine. She has been my living vault for 6 months, carrying notarized copies of those key documents with her every time she was in the same room as Marla, waiting for the right moment. He sat back. Tonight was not supposed to happen like this. The plan was simpler. I was going to announce the new trust during my toast, a warning shot, a new set of rules. I would have dealt with Savannah and Marla privately, using the audit as leverage. He looked at the glass in his hand. But when Marla yanked that bag, when she struck you, she escalated the timeline. She moved from private deceit to public assault. She forced my hand. She forced the full public audit. She was a few minutes ahead of schedule, but the result is the same. He looked up at me, and the cold engineering in his eyes was gone, replaced by that distant, 10-year-old regret. I am sorry, Noelle, he said. His voice was quiet. Not for this. This is just course correction. I am sorry for the delay. I was late. Late. The word hit me harder than the purse. 10 years late. It was the first apology, the only one. It was not from my mother. It was from him. I felt a sudden, unfamiliar pressure behind my eyes, a thawing, the cold, disciplined system I had built inside my chest, the one that ran on logic and efficiency, suddenly had to account for a new, unexpected variable. I was not prepared for an apology. I took a breath. I filed the emotion. That was data from an old event. I had to deal with the new system. I did not cry. I did not hug him. I looked at the man who had just made me his partner. The wind farm, I said. He blinked, surprised by the sudden pivot. What? The Hale Wind Company, my 22%. I need the data. I was standing. I was pacing, my mind already running calculations. Who manufactures the turbines? Is it Vestas? GE? What is our current maintenance contract? What is the downtime schedule? Who are we selling the power to? What are the terms of the power purchase agreements? When do they expire? What is our exposure to the fluctuating energy market? My grandfather was silent. He was staring at me. Then, for the first time that night, he smiled. It was not a cold smile. It was not an assessing smile. It was a genuine, warm smile of profound relief. "For 30 years, he said, his voice almost a chuckle. 30 years. I have tried to get Lydia, or Marla, or Savannah to ask me one. Single. Intelligent question about the business that pays for their white dresses. The only thing they ever wanted to talk about was the dividend schedule." He stood up, walking over to me, and placed his hand on my good shoulder. "The family composition has been wrong for decades. Noelle, it was all weight, no structure. It has been unbalanced. It needs an engineer." He squeezed my shoulder. "It needs someone who can read the wind." I nodded. This was a language I understood, a system in need of optimization. "I will accept the board seat," I said. "I will be the co-trustee for the Hale Integrity Trust." "Good. But I have a condition," I said. He raised a single white eyebrow. "My rules, my SOPs. The first rule is transparency. This world of secrets." I motioned to the closed door. "The whispers, the backroom deals, the letter about my land. That is a failed system. It breeds inefficiency and corruption. We are not a monarchy. We are a corporation, and the stakeholders need to see the ledger." "What are you proposing?" he asked. "I will draft a one-page summary of the Hale Integrity Trust, the new governing structure, the asset allocation, and the morality clause. We will distribute it, via registered mail, to every single member of the Hale family. No more whispers, no more guessing, just the data. They deserve to know the new rules of the game." My grandfather studied me. He was seeing the woman who had built Swift Lines. He was seeing the new boss. He nodded, the smile returning. "Draw up the memo. Ms. Whitaker. I will be proud to sign it." The agreement with my grandfather in the study was a new contract, but the war was not over. It had just entered a new phase. The old guard, Marla and Savannah, had been routed, but they were not neutralized. They had spent their lives navigating the world through emotion, influence, and threats. They would not understand my language of systems and data, so they would revert to the only tactics they knew. The counterattack came less than 12 hours later. I was in the club's business center, which I had commandeered at 6 a.m. I was already drafting the transparency memo for the Hale Trust. My good shoulder stiff, but my mind sharp. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, a local Renfield law office. "Ms. Whitaker," a slick male voice said, "this is Martin Fields. I am representing Mrs. Marla Hale. My client has instructed me to inform you that she is pressing charges for assault and public defamation." I stopped typing. I pictured Marla, broken and defeated, and realized I had underestimated her. She was a cornered animal, and cornered animals are predictable. They bite. "Assault?" I said, my voice perfectly level. "My client was violently struck by your aunt, at your instigation, and you then proceeded to rifle through her personal effects." "Mr. Fields," I interrupted, my voice dropping into the cold, flat tone I used for difficult drivers. "You are misinformed. I was the one who was struck. Your client, Mrs. Marla Hale, violently grabbed a handbag from my aunt, Ms. Elaine Hale, and in the ensuing struggle, struck me with the bag, causing significant bruising to my shoulder and collarbone. That is not what my client recalls. It will be her word against yours, and Mrs. Hale is a respected member of this. It will not be her word against mine. Mr. Fields," I said. "It will be her actions against a high-definition video recording." Silence on the other end. "Excuse me?" "I am, as we speak, at the Renfield Country Club," I said. "I am sure you are aware that for insurance and security purposes, the main ballroom, lobby, and all public areas are under 24-hour video surveillance. I have already submitted a formal request to the club's legal counsel for the preservation of all footage from last night, between the hours of 8 p.m. and 11 p.m. I let that hang in the air, the sound of a man recalculating. I will be in touch, he said, and the line went dead. My next call was to Mr. Davies, the club manager, and his lawyer. Ms. Whitaker, the lawyer, a sharp woman named Chen, said, "We have your request. I wanted to assure you, our system is fully automated. All footage is immediately and securely uploaded to an off-site cloud server with a verified timestamp. It cannot be accessed, altered, or deleted by any on-site staff, including Mr. Davies or myself. It is a closed loop. The footage is preserved and, I can confirm, it is crystal clear." "Thank you," I said. "That is all I need to know." I hung up. Marla's first move was neutralized. She could not bully the facts. The data was secure. The next attack was softer, a text message. It was from Savannah. "This is a nightmare. My mother is hysterical. You have ruined everything. We need to talk. Just us. No lawyers. We can make a deal. This internal family stuff doesn't need to be public. Meet me for coffee." It was the classic Savannah move. The appeal to us. The suggestion of a secret. A special arrangement just for her. It was how she had navigated her entire life, bending rules she believed did not apply to her. I texted back, "No, there will be no off-the-record negotiations. All future communications regarding the Hale Trust, the audit, or last night's events must be conducted through the Trust's official legal counsel and the independent auditors. I will be sending a contact list shortly." She replied instantly, "You heartless bitch, you are tearing this family apart." I replied with one word, transparency. I put my phone on silent. It was time to build the new system. I went back down to the ballroom. It was clean. Sunlight streaming through the tall windows, smelling of lemon polish. The ghosts of last night were gone. Mr. Davies was there, as was the MC from the night before. A man named Gary, who was signing some paperwork. They both looked pale and exhausted. "Gentlemen," I said. I was holding a clear plastic evidence bag, a box of serialized security seals I kept in my briefcase for high-value cargo, and a printed document. I placed the USB drive, the audit of Savannah's spending, on the table. "This is a chain of custody form," I said. "I am formally logging this item as evidence related to the Hale Integrity Trust. I need you both to witness me sealing it." They looked at each other, confused. "I am not a cop, Ms. Whitaker," Gary, the MC, said. "You are not," I agreed. "You are a nonpartisan third party. You witnessed the events. You saw where this item came from. That is all I need. I am establishing an unbroken, verifiable sequence of possession. This is how we prevent this from becoming a he said, she said argument. This is how we use procedure." I placed the USB drive in the bag. I closed the zip. I ran one of the numbered, tamper-proof seals through the hole. I pulled it tight. "I, Noelle Whitaker, am sealing this item at 10:14 a.m., I said, writing it on the form. "Please, sign here, acknowledging you saw me seal this specific, labeled item in this specific, numbered bag." They both signed. Mr. Davies, the manager, looked at me with a new understanding. "You have done this before." "I ship sensitive materials," I said. "Pharmaceuticals, electronics. This is just another piece of cargo." I countersigned the document, took a photo of it with my phone, and then emailed the photo to my grandfather, Aunt Elaine, and the club's lawyer. Data logged, chain of custody established. My next move was broader. I went back to the business center and composed a group email. The recipient list was every known member of the Hale family. The subject was, "Notice of Transparency Meeting, the Hale Integrity Trust." The email was short, professional, and cold. "To the beneficiaries and stakeholders of the Hale family assets, please be advised that a mandatory meeting will be held in 72 hours at 10 a.m. at the Hale Ridge Wind Farm Administrative Offices. The purpose of this meeting is to provide full transparency on the new governing structure of the family's assets, now consolidated under the Hale Integrity Trust. We will review the Trust's articles, the new governance structure, and the responsibilities of all beneficiaries. A full summarized brief of the trust's terms will be distributed. Coffee and pastries will be provided. I attached one document. It was not the trust itself. It was a one-page standard operating procedure. I had titled it SOP 001, Conflict of Interest and Beneficiary Conduct. It was a simple bulleted list. It defined conflicts of interest. It defined the morality clause. It detailed the exact, unbiased, third-party procedure for reporting a breach. It detailed the penalties, as defined by my grandfather: automatic, non-negotiable forfeiture of all standing. I was not just inviting them to a meeting, I was handing them the new rulebook. I was replacing their unspoken system of influence and emotion with my written system of procedure. I hit send. Within 5 minutes, my mother called. She was not texting, she was calling, and she was sobbing. "Noelle, please," she wept. "What are you doing? An email? An SOP? This is a family. We are supposed to close ranks, to handle this behind closed doors. You are airing all our dirty laundry. Think of Savannah. Think of Marla. You are ruining them." I let her cry. I listened. It was the same argument she had probably used on my father, the one she had used to justify a decade of silence. It is easier to be quiet. It is easier to pretend. "Mother," I said, my voice quiet, but not unkind. "This is not about dirty laundry. This is about a systemic failure. The closed-door policy is what allowed Savannah to steal. It is what allowed Marla to convince you to sell my land. The system is broken. I am fixing it." But what about me?" she whispered, the tears stopping, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. "That letter, Marla's lawyer. What will happen to me?" Here it was, the real variable. My mother, caught between her old loyalties and her new terror. "That depends on you," I said, choosing my words with care. "You are in a difficult legal position. You were a conspirator in a plan to commit fraud. However, you are also a witness. You have a choice." "A choice?" "You can continue to close ranks with Marla and Savannah. You will be tied to them, and you will fall with them when the audit is complete. Or you can choose to be a neutral witness. You can attend the meeting. You can sign a statement verifying the authenticity of that letter, acknowledging the plan, and cooperating with the trust. You can position yourself as a party who was manipulated by Marla, not as her co-conspirator. It is your only viable legal route." I was offering her an exit ramp, a pre-planned, logical route away from the pileup. "This is not about forgiveness, Mother," I said. "This is about risk management. I am offering you a way to mitigate your own legal exposure. The choice is yours." She hung up without answering. As I was logging off, my personal phone buzzed. A text from a number I knew by heart. Hank Doyle. "Saw your name in the local rags. Something about a blizzard. Sounded like you were kicking up dust." I smiled. He had no idea. I texted back, "You could say that. The storm just hit." His reply was instantaneous. "Remember what I taught you. Kid, when the storm hits, don't watch the dust. The dust just tells you where the chaos was. Watch the wind. That tells you where it's going. You're a map maker. Read the wind." I closed my phone. He was right. Marla and Savannah were the dust. The legal threats, the emotional texts, they were just distractions, the debris of the old system. The wind was the new structure, the trust, the audit, the procedures. As if on cue, a courier arrived. He had a single, signed letter from my grandfather. It was a temporary letter of authority, notarized and sealed. It gave me, Noelle Whitaker, full and temporary power to coordinate, secure, and organize all documents, files, and evidence pertaining to the formation of the Hale Integrity Trust, pending the first official board meeting. I now had the legal authority, I had the documents, I had the chain of custody. At the same time, the local news was starting to stir. The sudden, chaotic end of the Hale family gala was the biggest story in town. A reporter from the Renfield Gazette called my new business line, the one I had registered with the scholarship, "Ms. Whitaker, she said, we are hearing rumors of a major family dispute at the country club. Can you comment on allegations of an assault? Can you comment on the rumors of disinheritance? This was the final piece, the narrative. They had lost the legal battle and the internal one. Now, this was the public front. I cannot comment on any private family matters, I said, my voice warm, professional, and utterly bland. My focus, and the reason I returned to Renfield, was to announce the launch of the Bus Stop Grant. It is a new scholarship through my Map Back initiative, co-sponsored by my grandfather, Franklin Hale. We are investing in the next generation of logistics engineers right here in Ohio. I am happy to send you the full press release and the application details. We are very excited. There was a pause. The reporter had been expecting a tearful, angry victim. She got a CEO on a PR call. Scholarship? She said, deflated. Yes, I said. We are already accepting applications. I would love to talk to you about the kind of candidates we are looking for. I had just changed the story. I had taken their narrative of family drama and buried it under a positive, forward-looking story about local girl makes good, gives back to community. Marla and Savannah had no countermove. They could not go to the press and say, "She is lying. We are actually fighting about my daughter stealing and my stepdaughter being assaulted." They were trapped. Their closed-door policy, the secrecy they had relied on for decades, was now their prison. They had no story to distort, no narrative to distort. I hung up, sent the reporter the press release, and shut my laptop. The dust was settling. The wind was blowing in a new, clean direction, toward the farm. The 72 hours passed like a ticking clock. Each hour was a click of a gear moving into place. The legal threats from Marla's lawyer had vanished. The storm of texts from Savannah had gone silent. My press release about the Bus Stop Grant had run on the front page of the Renfield Gazette, effectively burying the country club scandal under a story of local philanthropy. I had seized the narrative. Now, it was 10 a.m. on a cold, gray Tuesday. I drove my rented sedan out of Renfield, leaving the manicured lawns and the old money whispers behind. The landscape flattened, opening up into the vast agricultural plain of central Ohio. And then I saw them. Hale Ridge. They rose from the flat earth like a new species of tree, a forest of white, three-bladed giants. There were dozens of them, stretching to the horizon. The sky was a uniform, heavy gray, and against it, the blades turned in a slow, hypnotic, asynchronous rhythm. There was a sound, not a noise, but a presence, a deep, rotational whoosh that was more felt than heard. It was the sound of immense, captured power, the sound of my grandfather's logic. It was beautiful, in the way a perfectly balanced engine is beautiful. I parked in front of the administrative building, a low-slung, functional structure of steel and glass, a stark contrast to the country club's white pillars. This was a place of work. Inside, the new Hale Integrity Trust was assembling. My grandfather was already there, at the head of a long, polished steel conference table. Aunt Elaine was beside him, holding a new, simpler leather briefcase. She looked nervous, but she also looked taller. And then, the defendants. Marla and Savannah sat at the far end of the table, as far from my grandfather as possible. They were not the shimmering, white-clad angels from the gala. They were diminished. Marla wore a simple dark pantsuit, her face pale and drawn. Savannah was hunched over her phone, her hair pulled back in a severe, joyless ponytail. My mother, Lydia, sat alone, between the two factions, a neutral territory of one. When I walked in, she looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. She had seen my exit ramp, the legal route I had offered, and she had taken it. She gave a small, terrified nod. She had signed the witness statement. "Good," Franklin said, his voice echoing in the minimalist room. "Everyone is here, Ms. Harris." He gestured to a woman in a sharp suit I did not know. The Trust's new counsel. "Has the minutes." "We will not be meeting here," I said, setting my briefcase down. Franklin looked at me, a question in his eyes. I held up the old, heavy skeleton key, the one from the bag, the one labeled Hale Vault, Originals. "We will meet in the archive," I said. "This is a restructuring. We need to see the original charter." My grandfather understood. He nodded, a slow smile touching his lips. "Of course, this way." He led us down a hallway, through the turbine control room, a place of glowing green data screens I longed to analyze, and to a heavy fireproof steel door. This was the vault, not a bank vault, but an archive. He gestured to me. I put the key in the lock. It was an old mechanical lock that required pressure. I turned it. There was a heavy, satisfying thunk as the deadbolts retracted. I pulled the heavy door open. The air that rolled out was not musty. It was cold, dry, and smelled of history. The smell of cured paper, old leather bindings, and a faint trace of the machine oil used to calibrate the climate control system. It was a small room, lined floor to ceiling with gray metal shelves. But this was not just a file room. This was the family's source code. On one wall were the ledgers from the original Hale farm, bound in dark green leather. The script inside perfect and faded. There were framed, monochrome photographs of men I did not know, standing in front of seas of wheat, my ancestors, the harvest. On the other wall, the new history, rows of thick white binders. PPA, Ohio Edison, 20-year term. Turbine maintenance schedule, GE. Federal wind subsidy filings. This was the engine, the past, and the power. My grandfather walked to a shelf at the back. It held a laptop and a small digital audio recorder. "The originals," he said, echoing the key's label. "As requested." He turned to Marla and Savannah. "You know, when I proposed this new trust 2 weeks ago, in a private family meeting, your reactions were concerning. I felt it was prudent to record that meeting, for my own records." Marla's face went from pale to bloodless. My grandfather pressed play on the recorder. His own voice filled the small room, tinny but clear. "And I am concerned about how we have handled Noelle. It has been 10 years. I feel we owe her." Marla's voice, sharp and dismissive. "Oh, Franklin, stop." Pushing her out was the best thing for her. It was a lesson in independence. She was soft. We made her tough. She should thank us. Then, Savannah's voice, bright and careless, a brittle laugh. "Seriously. And this obsession with the legacy card? Please, I am the legacy. It is my money. I am just borrowing from myself. I will pay it back when my own trust matures. It is not like I am stealing. It is just optimized cash flow." The recording stopped. The silence in the vault was absolute. This was not the shocked hush of the country club. This was the sterile silence of a laboratory after a failed experiment. Marla and Savannah had convicted themselves, in their own words, with their own arrogance. I stepped forward into that silence. I was no longer the girl at the bus stop. I was not the benefactor. I was the new board member. I was the co-trustee. "This," I said, "was a systemic failure. The old system was built on secrets, assumptions, and verbal agreements. It was inefficient. It is now obsolete. We are implementing the new system." I looked at Marla. "Marla, as of this morning, you are removed from all Hale family committees and signatory lists. You will retain a standard beneficiary stipend, identical to all other non-governing members, contingent upon your adherence to the morality clause of the trust. You will have no administrative power." I looked at Savannah. "Savannah, the audit contained in the sealed USB drive details fraudulent withdrawals totaling just over $400,000. You have 2 options. 1. The Hale Integrity Trust will hand this audit and the accompanying evidence to the district attorney, and we will pursue criminal prosecution for fraud." Her breath hitched. Option 2. Restitution. You will sign a legally binding agreement to repay the full amount, with interest, over a period of 60 months. To fund this, you will liquidate your personal assets, including your car and the contents of your wardrobe, which, according to the audit, are quite valuable. You will sell your condo and move into a rental. You will get a job." "A job?" she whispered, horrified. "Yes. In fact, we have one for you. You will work for 18 months. For standard administrative pay, for the bus stop grant, you will not be a manager. You will be an administrative assistant, under the direct supervision of Aunt Elaine. You will be the one processing the applications from the young people you called pathetic. You will learn the system from the bottom up. Those are your terms." She was trapped. The data had her. She looked at her mother, but Marla was staring at the floor. Broken. Savannah nodded, a single, jerky motion, biting her lips so hard I thought it might bleed. I looked at my mother. "Lydia, you have signed the witness statement, verifying the letter and attesting that you were acting under undue influence. The trust accepts this. You will retain your honorary status. You will have no voting rights and no financial authority, but you will be provided for. Your dignity is intact, provided you do not contest this new structure." She was weeping, but for the first time, they were tears of relief. I had given her the exit ramp. Finally, I looked at Aunt Elaine. "Aunt Elaine, the trust confirms your appointment as co-trustee, specializing in community outreach. You will manage the bus stop grant and be the new liaison for all local philanthropic efforts. Your salary will be commensurate with your new position." Elaine looked at my grandfather, who nodded. She stood up straighter, a new, quiet authority settling on her. "Lastly," I said, "the summary of the trust." I handed the stack of memos to Ms. Harris, the lawyer. "This one-page document, detailing the new rules, the morality clause, and the governance structure, will be mailed to every member of the Hale family, from the cousins to the uncles, by noon today. We are ending the gossip by making it obsolete. We are replacing secrecy with accountability." I turned from the defeated old guard and looked at the wall of old, dead history. I unrolled a document of my own. It was a map. It was a new map. It showed the Hale Ridge wind farm. It showed the high-tension power lines. It showed the interstate highway grid. And overlaid on all of it, in blue, were the routes of my own company, Swift Lines. "This is our future," I said, taping the map to the wall, right next to the faded photos of the wheat harvests. "This is farm-to-grid logistics. We are not just a power company. We are a logistics company. We do not just sell electrons. We manage the flow. We will use SwiftLine's data to optimize turbine downtime, scheduling maintenance against real-time fluctuations in market energy prices. We will create a new system to route emergency power to local infrastructure during storms. We are going to optimize the grid itself." I stepped back. The old farm and my new company merged. My grandfather had been watching me, his eyes bright. He had not seen a daughter or a granddaughter. He had seen an heir. He had seen his own engineering mind, mirrored back at him. He stepped forward, not with his cane, but with his hands. He reached into the pocket of his vest. He pulled out a heavy gold pocket watch. It was old, the case worn smooth. "This was my father's," he said, his voice thick. "He used it to time the harvests, to make sure the crews were efficient. I used it to time the first turbine installations." He pressed it into my hand. It was heavy. "It is not about the money, Noelle. It is about being on time. It is about the discipline of the schedule." He looked at me, his eyes holding mine. "You were late coming home, but for this," he gestured to the new map on his wall. "You are right on time. My conscience, my legacy, you are right on time." The tension in the room finally broke. The last piece of the old broken machine had been replaced. Aunt Elaine, who had been quiet, stepped forward. She was holding a large thermos and a paper bag. She set them down on the old wooden desk, next to the ledgers. I brought soup," she said, "and some bread." My grandfather smiled. He looked at me. I nodded. We did not go back to the country club. We did not go to a fancy restaurant. The four of us, Franklin, Elaine, my mother, and I sat in the cold, dry air of the archive. We ate hot vegetable soup from plastic cups and tore off pieces of crusty bread. My grandfather, holding his soup, pointed to one of the old photos. That was the drought of 1953. We had to calculate water usage down to the pint. It was a logistical nightmare. I looked at my map. That is like the blizzard of 24, I said. We had to route generator fuel based on which roads were cleared, minute by minute. He smiled. I smiled back. We were speaking the same language. We were surrounded by the paper ghosts of the past and the digital blueprints of the future. The family was not defined by its blood. It was defined by its work, and the work, finally, had begun. The transparency meeting at the Hale Ridge Wind Farm was my new stage. Marla, however, had one last, desperate move. She had been defeated in the vault, but she still believed in the power of public opinion, her only remaining weapon. She leaked her version of the story. The morning of the meeting, Ms. Johnson, the reporter from the Renfield Gazette I had spoken to, called me back. Her voice was sharp. Ms. Whitaker, I am getting conflicting reports. A source close to the family, who wishes to remain anonymous, is alleging that you are engaged in a hostile takeover of your grandfather's assets, that he is senile, and that you are using this new scholarship as a media cover to steal the family fortune. Marla. It was her last, pathetic shot, fired from the dark. Ms. Johnson, I said, my voice perfectly level. That is a very serious allegation. The timing is interesting. We are holding the Hale Integrity Trust's first transparency meeting today, in 1 hour. At the Hale Ridge Administrative Office, it is an open meeting for all beneficiaries. If you are concerned about the truth, you should be there. You are inviting the press to a private family meeting? She asked, stunned. I am inviting you, I said. You have heard the allegation. Now come and see the data. Bring your camera. An hour later, the main conference room was packed. It was not just the extended family. The cousins, the aunts, the uncles, all clutching their one-page SOP memos. In the back, standing by the wall, were Ms. Johnson and a cameraman. Marla, sitting at the far end of the table with Savannah, saw the camera and blanched. This was not her plan. She wanted to leak a story, not be held accountable in the light. I stood at the front, next to a large digital screen. Thank you all for coming, I said, my voice crisp and clear. There have been rumors, allegations of a hostile takeover. I am here to provide the data. We are recording this meeting for the Trust's official records, and we have a media representative present to ensure full transparency. I did not start with the Trust. I did not start with the money. I started with the work. I clicked a button. The screen lit up with a map. It was the blizzard relief map from last winter, the one that had put my name in the paper. It was a complex web of red, yellow, and blue lines, showing blocked state highways and my optimized detours. This, I said, is the cover story. This is the work of Swift lines. The red lines are impassable highways. The blue lines are the routes my system created. This blue line, right here, shows the route we mapped to get emergency generators to Renfield County Hospital. The main roads were closed. The state system was gridlocked. Our data got that convoy to the hospital with exactly 45 minutes of fuel to spare before their backup generators failed. I looked at the reporter, then at the family. Those are the numbers. They speak for themselves. This is the competence the Hale Integrity Trust is investing in. It is not theft. It is optimization. The room was silent. The reporter was scribbling furiously. Before anyone could speak, my grandfather, Franklin Hale, stood up, leaning on his cane. My granddaughter is modest, he said, his voice ringing with authority, the camera immediately zooming in on him. She shows you her work. Now I must show you my failure. He looked at the camera, but his gaze was distant, aimed at a decade ago. This reporter, he said, was allegedly told I am senile and that my assets are being stolen. The truth is simpler and sadder. I am guilty. but not of senility. I am guilty of delay. 10 years ago, I failed this family. I failed my granddaughter. I knew she was left at a bus stop with nothing. I knew it was wrong, and I did nothing. He struck his cane on the floor. I told myself it was not my place. I was a coward, hiding behind politeness. What you are seeing today is not a takeover. It is a correction. It is me, in full command of my faculties, attempting to correct a decade-old mistake. I am not being manipulated. I am finally acting with integrity. I chose Noelle not because she is my granddaughter, but because she is the only one in this family who shares my engineering mind. She builds systems. The rest? He waved a dismissive hand at Marla. They only know how to spend. Any questions about my competence are now answered. It was a masterful stroke. He had taken Marla's narrative of elder abuse and turned it into a public confession of his own failing, completely neutralizing her attack. He had co-opted the story, sealing my position as his chosen successor. Ms. Johnson, the reporter, was sharp. Mr. Hale, what about the reports of an assault at the country club? We heard Ms. Whitaker was attacked. This was the next trap, the legal one. We have that, too, I said. I clicked to the next file. As per standard procedure, we have reviewed the security footage from the club. We have queued it for this meeting. I played the clip. It was silent, grainy, but clinically clear. It showed Marla shouting. It showed Elaine trying to shield the bag. It showed Marla lunging, the violent yank, the struggle, and the bag swinging in its heavy arc, hitting my shoulder. It was clear it was not a deliberate strike from Marla. She was not trying to hit me with the bag. She was trying to get the bag. The impact was the result of her rage at Elaine. It was battery, born of a struggle. The footage shows, I said, a chaotic, desperate struggle. It does not show a premeditated assault. It shows a complete loss of control. I turned to the room, my gaze landing on Marla, who was ashen. I have been asked if I will be pressing charges. The answer is no. Marla looked up, her eyes wide with shock. I am not interested in retribution, I said, my voice cold. That is an inefficient use of resources. My grandfather's trust has a morality clause. Marla's actions at the gala and Savannah's documented fraud are a breach of that clause. The trust has already handled this. I am an engineer. I do not use the law for revenge. I use it to write better rules. The meeting was now a tribunal. The old order was in its final collapse. Ms. Harris, the trust's lawyer, stepped forward. We require one final signature to ratify the initial findings of the trust, verifying the contents of the bag and the authenticity of the documents. Ms. Lydia Hale, as you were present, your witness statement is required. My mother, Lydia, who had been silent, stood up. She looked pale, but she was not shaking. She had made her choice. She had taken my exit ramp. She walked to the front of the room, picked up the pen, and signed the document, her signature firm. Then she stopped. On the table, in its sealed evidence bag, was my laminated $10 bill. She looked at it. She reached out one trembling finger and touched the plastic. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a decade of shame. I am sorry, she whispered, so low only I could hear. I am so sorry, Noelle. It was not an absolution. It was not a reunion. It was an acknowledgement, a single data point of remorse. I nodded. Once. Next, Savannah. She stood up, holding a single folder. She looked different, smaller. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a sullen, terrified pragmatism. I have submitted my repayment plan, she said, her voice barely audible. I will be selling my condo. The car is already listed. She took a breath. I am formally requesting to work, to fill the position for the bus stop grant, for the 18 months, as specified. I looked at her. She was trying. This was her only move, her only path. The trust accepts your repayment plan, I said, my voice flat. Your request to work for the grant is also provisionally accepted. You will not, however, manage it. You will be an administrative assistant. Reporting directly to Aunt Elaine, you will undergo a 3-month training and probationary period. Your performance will be monitored. If you meet the metrics, you will stay. If you do not, you are terminated. Are those terms clear? Yes, she whispered, handing the folder to Elaine. She sat down, her face pale. She had accepted the new system. The meeting was over. The family, the beneficiaries, filed out, their faces a mixture of shock, relief, and calculation. The new hierarchy was in place, written on a 1-page memo. Marla was the last to leave. She had no power. Her allies were gone. Her narrative was destroyed. Her audience had left the theater. She looked at me, her eyes empty, and for the first time, I saw her for what she was. A failed system, a bad piece of code, full of bugs, now rendered obsolete. She said nothing. She just turned and walked out of the administrative building, alone. The room was empty, save for the core, me, Franklin, and Elaine. Aunt Elaine came over. She was holding the vintage handbag, the one that had started it all. It was empty now. All the evidence, the documents, were with the lawyers. I believe this is yours now, she said, holding it out to me. I do not want it, Elaine, I said. I think you do, she said, a small, new smile on her face. That bag, it was used to strike you. It was a weapon. Now, it is just an empty vessel. It needs a new purpose. It should be used to carry your maps. I took the bag. It was heavy, good leather, a solid container. I nodded. My grandfather clapped his hands, the sound decisive. Good, the work is done. Now, the real work begins. He pulled out his phone. I called the chopper. It is waiting. The chopper? The family helicopter, he said, smiling. We used to use it to impress investors. It has been sitting in the hangar for a year. Today, we use it for an actual inspection. And you, he pointed at me, are leading it. You wanted to see the turbines? You are about to see them from the top down. We walked out onto the cold, bright grass of the landing pad. A sleek blue helicopter sat waiting, its rotors beginning to turn. It was an old symbol of their wealth, their excess. But as I climbed into the co-pilot seat and the pilot handed me the headset, I looked back at my grandfather. He was not getting in. He was watching from the ground, smiling. The helicopter lifted, the powerful whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of the blades mixing with the deep, rotational hum of the turbines. The pilot banked, and we flew out over the farm, over the forest of white giants. I was no longer the girl on the ground. Looking up, I was the new pilot, with the new maps, surveying my new domain. My office is not in a high-rise. It is the main control room at Hale Ridge, the one with the glowing green data screens. It smells of ozone, coffee, and the dry, clean air of the plains. It is my home. On the wall, next to my new farm-to-grid logistics map, is a simple, brushed metal frame. Inside it, there is no diploma. There is no award. There is just a single $10 bill, laminated in cheap, clear plastic. Beneath it, I had a small metal plaque engraved. 5 simple words. They left me by the road. I draw the maps. The knot was finally untied. Not by revenge, not by rage. It was untied by a calculator. It was untied by a spreadsheet, by a notarized signature, by a transparent memo, and by the sharp, clean click of a purse clasp opening at exactly the right moment. I did not just get my revenge. I optimized the entire system. I took control of the wheel. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I am so curious to know where in the world you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and let us know. I would love to connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and if you want to support us even more, hit that hype button so this story can be heard by even more people.